Hello, so sadly I need to do a video on this, and this is going to be, the sad truth about knife crime in the UK, and the difference, although I've talked about subjects like this before, it's worth going over again, the difference between what the media pushes and sort of official government narrative pushes compared to the actual reality of it. Now, the problem is, at a government level and a media level, you keep commonly seeing that apparently the availability of knives is to blame for knife crime. So basically what they're trying to say is that all violent crime that happens only becomes knife crime because knives are easily available. If those knives weren't easily available, then people wouldn't stab each other, they'd apparently not commit crime. Now obviously people stabbing each other is a much bigger symptom sort of gang violence or just general urban decay sort of violence. And the thing that you need to obviously bear in mind is that lots of this violence would still happen regardless of if knives are available or not, and something as common as a knife is pretty much impossible to make illegal or actually enforce. Now, as said before, the media will always depict knife crime as something like this, a giant sort of dagger or a bayonet, or a convenient pocket knife being used, something like this. Now actually the reality is, if you look up some of the crime statistics, and time again, you will find that it's not knives like this that are being used, giant bayonets, as much as they would be very effective at stabbing people. It is simply kitchen knives, and the reason it is kitchen knives being used is they're cheap and easily available. Now the human body is predominantly very sort of, fragile and squishy to a degree, and almost any knife can stab through a person fairly easily. Now obviously yes, some knives are more suited for it than others. A bayonet, for example, a big dagger, yes, that is if it's thrusted into somebody, going to do more damage and penetrate them more easily than a kitchen knife. However, an average adult with, or even a teenager sadly, with enough force can easily stab somebody to death with basically any sort of slightly sharp object. It's not very hard, humans have been killing each other with simple tools for pretty much as long as we've existed. Cavemen hit each other with rocks and very basic stone and flint tools, and we've not really evolved past that sadly. So kitchen knives, the actual knives being used in the majority of knife crime, simply because they are cheap and easy to get. Now if you're a teenager, like, the law already applies that you have to be 18 to buy a knife. So if you go into a store and try and buy a knife and you don't look old enough, the person at the cash register is obliged to ask you for ID, identification, so they can check your date of birth. Now if you're not 18, they're not allowed to sell you a knife. It's a crime for actually a shop or anything like that to sell goods that require you to be 18, same with films and alcohol and whatever else, to people under the age of 18. So the shop can be prosecuted if they sell to somebody under the age of 18. However, if you live pretty much anywhere, in your kitchen there are going to be knives in the kitchen somewhere, maybe in a drawer in a knife rack. And any of those knives, unfortunately, could be obviously used for horrible purposes of stabbing somebody to death or maiming somebody. So if you're a teenager and you're involved with gang violence, it's not like it's hard to find a sharp knife. Every house has got several in them. And that extends to other tools as well. Screwdrivers are often used in stabbings, and again, everybody's got screwdrivers in their toolbox. They're a very simple to get thing. Now I don't even know of screwdrivers if shops actually check you're 18 to buy them, because as I said, you can stab somebody with them, they're very effective at it, but I've not seen, places, and when I used to work in a retail job years ago, you didn't have to ID people for claw hammers and things like that, despite the fact somebody could very obviously get a claw hammer, bash somebody in the head and kill them very quickly and efficiently with, a claw hammer. But you didn't have to ID people for those either. So, obviously, what the point I'm getting at is it's not, collectors' knives and things like that that are causing the knife crime problem. It is, the deeper problems in society we have in Britain. And I'd argue one of the very big, causes of that is at the moment having an ineffective police force that isn't funded or trained properly, as well as not very harsh punishments for people caught, committing the most serious of crimes. Because if you're thinking of going out and committing a crime, you're not likely to say, oh, I like the look of a certain dagger online, I'm going to buy that dagger and stab people with it. That's not really how it works. You're actually going to say, there's money to be made with drug dealing or whatever else, and there's not many police on the streets, and the sentence, if I do get caught, isn't going to be very harsh, so that means I'm more likely to carry a knife and, potentially use it. It's all the factors like that, not liking the look of a particular knife, because as I said, pretty much anything can be used to stab somebody to death, unfortunately. So this really sad thing about this is obviously you're still getting teenagers killed and everything in this sort of gang, unprovoked violence, some of it, which is actually very sad, people's lives being cut short before they even reach 18, adulthood. Not something you really expect to be happening in a first world country, but sadly it is in modern day Britain. So that's the sad aspect of it, and you've also got the sad aspect of it that you're not actually getting the results needed. So places like Blades and Bows, might have to close until further notice, simply due to the fact they don't know how the knife laws are going to change in this country, because unfortunately the government wants to push through knife laws that are going to punish collectors and everything like that, which again are not the people using the knives to cause violence and anything like that, but sadly the government thinks by treating a symptom and not the cause of the problem, as in, rather than addressing poverty, an inefficient police force, not harsh enough sentences, all that sort of stuff, what they're actually going to do is just try and restrict the knives further. And as said, the knives being used in the knife crimes for the majority of the occasions are the ones that aren't going to be restricted in the new legislation, which is just baffling. So, sorry I did another update video on one of these. I've still not really heard what's happening with this new knife legislation yet, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be good. It doesn't seem like it's going to sadly stop any of this violence that's happening, and, it's just going to punish collectors like me. So, it's, again, something that's just making the situation worse for everybody, not better, and these knife crimes are still going to carry on with kitchen knives and tools, because they're so poorly restricted anyway, and everybody's got access to them and they're cheap. It's just going to carry on. And even if you somehow did manage to blanket ban all knives like that, then it would just be something else being used, because, as I said, all you're doing is treating a symptom and not the cause of the problem.